Okay. Good evening, everyone, to Active Travel Cafe. And We're going to have an excellent session this evening. I know that's going to happen. Our keynote speaker for this evening, which we'll be turning to in just a moment, is Sarah Mitchell, who's the CEO at Cycling UK. And Sarah's going to give us an update on all of their activities, the Cycle Advocacy Network rebranding, and the 10th anniversary of the Big Bike Revival. So we've got loads to get into with Sarah, which is really exciting. But as ever, we like to start our sessions with a roundup of news from where you are. And I think we probably might lead with some news from Cambridge because I think we've got somebody from Cambridge who's really keen to share some news. Yes, Martin, there you are, waving at us. Martin, did you want to go first on our news roundup and share your news from Cambridge?
Yes, why not? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Martin.
And I'll just share my screen if that's all right. Is that visible now? You can see there's a thing about the English devolution bill. Yeah,
Yeah, we've got it.
great. I've been looking at the English Devolution Community Empowerment Bill, which is an important set of legislation going through, and particularly in regards to what's called the Key Route Network. And this is something that's arisen in Cambridge particularly because the local mayor is planning to use it essentially for fairly political purposes, I think to say, to try to overturn a low traffic neighbourhood and associated things. So just firstly, what really is it about? And I think it's actually, more I've looked at this, essentially what it's doing is on the left, you've got the current structure of most local government. Obviously, there are London and so on, and Manchester, but for the rest of the country, you've essentially got county councils, which do all these sort of quite expensive things like transport, education, social care, and so on. And for that, they cover both strategy and delivery. And then we've also got district councils, which also do strategy and delivery for a whole load of other stuff. And essentially, what the devolution bill and the general change list councils are doing is to change that from being a sort of side by side structure to being a more hierarchical structure, where you have mayoral authorities who basically set the strategy for everything, all of this stuff, and then you have councils, which are essentially just become delivery bodies. They're just service providers. They're essentially just sort of doing stuff for everything. So although these two are sort of being collapsed into the unitary councils, the strategy is actually moving away from them, more remotely, if you like, into strategic authorities. So that's kind of the underlying thing that's going on. And I don't think that's actually really playing out in any sort of national debate, but it seems sort of what's happening. And if you look at the mayoral authority power, the mayoral authorities that are proposed, you can see this basic whole pile of stuff that's sort of going, highway authorities, micro mobility, adult education, planning, development, housing, all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of change going on here. And I think that, a lot of people need to be aware of this. Now, part of this is what's called the key route network. And the idea is basically the key route networks are a network of some of the most important local roads in an area. It doesn't actually say what the purpose of this is, but essentially what it's trying to do is to sort of, if you like, pull out those main roads, supposedly main roads, so that mayors can essentially control them directly rather than local authorities do it. The key thing is that the mayors will have the power to direct highway authorities in the use of the highway and so on those roads. So essentially, once this key route network has been defined, at that point, the mayors have sole executive responsibility, i.e., not committees, executive responsibility to make whatever changes they want. So the designation of these key roads, there's this two-stage process. The first thing is, sorry, the creation of them. There's the designation, which is basically where the combined authority, the councils that make up a combined authority, which is, the county councils and districts, collectively agree which roads form the network. So they're sort of defining the network, if you like. And note that in the legislation, the highway authorities do not have a veto. Now, one or two authorities like Cambridgeshire will, in theory, retain that because of historical legislation. But in general, this is the position. So as long as the majority of all the councils, if there's a say two county councils and 5 districts or something, even if the counties disagree, as long as the majority, they can define it. So you can see here, it says in the legislation, the mayor may not define a network unless the combined authority has passed a resolution approving the designation. There's no veto there. And so that puts in place the definition of the network. And then from that point on, there's what's called, if you like, the second part of it is the power of direction, which is basically the mayor deciding what he or she wants to do with that. And the combined authority has to cover the costs of that. So you can see there it says the power under the section to give a direction is exercisable only by the mayor on behalf of the combined authority. So this two-stage thing, and obviously the first one is very important because essentially once it's there, it's locked in. So I've been looking at this, and I think there are 5 problems. Firstly, nowhere in the legislation is the purpose of a key route network actually defined. What is it there for? What problem is it trying to solve? Secondly, as I say, there's no veto given to highway authorities. They may have strong disagreements about it, as is the case, for example, in Cambridgeshire, where a scheme has been in the highway and the mayor basically just disagrees. And in particular, there's no safeguards on the type of roads or streets. So you can end up with a situation where a highway authority, wants to, for example, put in a low traffic neighbourhood or any kind of change. The mayor disagrees and basically says, this particular tiny local street, I'm going to include it in my key route network. Now, I don't think that's the purpose of what a key route network is, but as far as I can see, there's literally no safeguard in the bill to prevent that situation. So what the corollary of this is essentially that any transport scheme that your local council may wish to do, essentially the mayor could override this by just basically getting it in that key route network list and then doing what they want with it. So, this is potentially a very big change. The fourth problem is it's very unclear what happens if a traffic regulation order is refused by the highway authority. So when I said about that power of direction, it's not totally clear, but as I understand it, that means the mayor will basically tell the local authority, the highway authority, this is going to change. However, traffic regulation orders are a sort of quasi-judicial process that the councils might disagree or whatever. It's not kind of clear what happens in that situation. It's not clear if, for example, TROs are actually moved up to the highway, to the combined authority, and so on. So there needs to be clarification. And in general, this essentially implements a sort of 3-tier highway system for which there's no real clear and rationale. A sort of national sort of highways as it is, but then you've got, as well as the sort of local roads, the entire local county network, you've got this sort of middle bit of regional network roads. And that sort of replaces this current 2-tier system. And I can see that there could be a lot of interactions between the regional and local that maybe are not, that could be pretty inefficient strategically. So those are the problems. And so the last thing is, I think there's action that we as a community need to do. Firstly, to understand the bill, because I think there's very little recognition of this. I've put the link there to the publications. Secondly, I think a group of people, people like myself and others on this call need to get together really and essentially put together proposed amendments to send to the Bill Committee, which is the group of about 10, 15 MPs who are basically about to go line by line through the legislation. The third thing is then to write to the Bill Committee, and that needs to be across the country. People need to write about these problems, and their next meeting is on the 14th of October. So there's very little time. Obviously, you need to consider things in advance. And also people need to write the MPs, and obviously active travel groups need to be informed. So I hope that's a useful summary. One thing I would just very quickly say is that the bill is actually quite hard to read in one respect because there are different types of combined authorities. And so when you look at the key route network, there's basically a whole set of sections where it basically defines the rules for one type and then it defines an almost identical block of text for the other type and so on. So you just have to be very careful that you're looking at the right bit. Anyway, I hope that's a useful summary. And I'd be happy to send out the slides to anyone who wants it.
Brilliant. Please do, Martin. If you want to send out, Wilf's given you a big round of applause there. So there you go. It's gone down well. Martin, if you could, if we could send out those slides, I think that'd be really excellent. Obviously, this will be in the YouTube film that's posted, but you've proposed getting a sort of a splinter group of Active Travel Cafe organised somewhere else. So if you want to organise that, perhaps pop something into the chat so people can get in touch with you maybe and organise outside this, but that's been super helpful. Thank you. I'm conscious of time, everybody, with Martin's update. It's really useful. Ruth, you had your hand up first, and I think, Mark, you might be coming in on the same subject as well. So,
well, I was speaking on what Martin just did, but I wanted to just be very brief, and I've just asked Ruth if it's okay. Because
Ruth,
otherwise
is
we'll
it
go
okay if
away
Mark
and come
jumps
back.
in?
Yeah. So Martin, I'm being involved in quite a lot of some of the similar sort of stuff on the bus services bill, and I sort of agree with some of your take and some of your don't agree with some of it. I think the problem is the potential for it to be used maliciously, which you've got in Cambridge. And I think what's genuinely happened is that the government's looked at it in. Obviously, they'd work strategically because no one would be so stupid as to just add a piece of lane, a quiet street to it just to scupper the thing. And I think that's it. Sean Berry, who's not quite my MP, but I know very well, is actually on the committee for that bill. I was talking to her about it at the weekend. So I'd be very much happy to be part of this group and to work with you on it. I just would say that as it's at the committee stage, writing to your MPs on everything is not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it, because then it has to be passed up to the people who are on the bill committee, and they will take much more notice of a small group of people, of a group of people writing a small number of letters. If they get spammed by hundreds of campaigners on lots of the same topic, they're actually less likely to listen to us than more likely. So I'm actually saying don't write to your MP at this stage. Let's work out what we're going to say and then think about it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Again, I think it sounds like if you do organise a meeting outside of this, maybe come back next week and update on what's been done, I think would be really good. Ruth, did you want to come in?
Yes, mine was different. I put a link. I don't know if any of you know, it's quite short notice. I've had it for a while. Isabel Clement, Wheels for Wellbeing. I'm delighted to announce we're putting the finishing touches to the much anticipated 5th edition of our Guide to Inclusive Cycling. We are launching it online on Thursday, the 25th of September at 12:30, and that was the link I put in. And I just think it's very, very useful for everyone to have, if they can attend it or sign up to it, so they then get the information. So when you get what about the disabled from your councillors, officers, blah, 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 this will be useful with fantastic information. And as we all know, Isabel Clement is wonderful. So I've put it in the link. I don't know if it can be re-put so people can read it, but I think it's worth signing up to Thursday, 12:30, 5 years of inclusive cycling.
Thanks, Ruth. That's excellent. What I'd suggest in a very cheeky way is I would repost that link again so it's further down the chat.
I'll be joking.
You can do it, honestly. So because that was 9 minutes ago, so we've scrolled past it now. So feel free. It sounds really, really good, really brilliant. Thanks, Ruth. And then H, did you want to come in briefly?
Just briefly. I've discovered something interesting in Ireland. A recycling company is using cargo bikes and actually going in a big way. They're called Panda. I'll put the link in the chat.
Brilliant.
And further, there's another K-Cycle which is doing a powered trailer, rather like the old post office electric-powered pedestrian buggies that clips on the back of the bike. So I'll put those links in. And just one other thing, we've got Voix going in both Glasgow and Edinburgh with slightly different schemes, but it looks like Velogic are doing the maintenance on both. So it's quite interesting to see how this is developing.
Brilliant. Thanks, H. Really good. And please do post those links in the chat. They sound brilliant. Brenton, did you want to come in?
Yes, I was at the Micromobility UK conference at Warwick University on Friday, which had everything from scooters through bikes to large cargo bikes. And a lot of the talk there was about new regulations the government has promised to bring in. The DFT representative there said there's nothing going to happen before next May. And I was there representing, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, LIMA, Light Mobility Association, which has been set up to represent initially vehicle manufacturers of everything smaller than cars, to try to articulate the arguments about, that missing middle in legislation. So the new legislation is going to be looking at, the government have said, scooters, disability vehicles, and a new LZEV category. And I chipped in and said, rather than more kludges added to the situation, which has been what's happened historically, that what we need is a sort of ground zero, new set of principles based on unalterable things. And I suggested safety and behavioural issues. So I'm convening a group of organisations interested in all of these different areas: vehicles, safety, cycling, what else did I say? Urbanism and so on, to try to come up with a common position to put to government, because many of us fear that they're not going to do the right thing. So thank you. Thanks, and if you're interested, just DM me.
Brilliant. Message Brendan if you want to get in touch. And Brendan, it sounds like you're limbering up to give a future talk. So let us know when you're ready. No. Adrian, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so you might have seen the press release which 2020 issued last week which showed that there were 882 fewer casualties in Wales because of 20 miles an hour. There will be another press release going out either today or tomorrow, and that's going to talk about the road casualty figures, which are coming out on Thursday. And that will show that if England had done the same, there would have been 15,000 fewer casualties. So just remember, 15,000 fewer casualties because of 20 miles an hour. That won't have happened. So it's just worth thinking about that. Please look out for the PR, and if you can, just repost it. That'd be really handy. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adrian. That's really excellent statistics. Really good reminder there. Thank you so much. So I think that's all our news roundup. Adam, you better be quick because we're going to Sarah now.
Yeah, apologies. Just I'll post the link. The other one about this is I think it's saved drivers in Wales something like £90 million already.
Yep.
Insurance costs. So I think that's another angle. I'll post a rather cold and analytical look at the insurance industry analysis of that in the chat. But it is one of those things that we also probably need to focus on. Is more about as an individual basis the amount of money it could save drivers in the UK if they did have this as a default 20.
Brilliant.
It's about
Adam,
50. It's about 50 quid a head. £50 a head. That's equivalent to about £2 billion.
Amazing. Okay, and thanks, Adam. You posted that in the chat. So that's the incredibly sexy and exciting link that Adam's just promoted is now in the chat. That's enough waiting. Let's go to Sarah from Cycling UK. Sarah, CEO of Cycling UK, you're going to give us an update on everything that's going on in your world. So can I hand over to you?
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everybody. As Steve says, I'm Sarah. I'm the Chief Executive of Cycling UK. Thank you very much for inviting me. I feel like I'm on very hallowed turf. I've never been to this group before, but I have heard of it. And I was just saying to Steve beforehand, before I came along to do this presentation today, I had a slightly unnerving experience of members of staff and trustees contacting me to wish me luck, which made me worried that actually I needed luck for something, which hopefully I won't. I'm going to try and share my screen to start with, which is always the most exciting challenge of doing any presenting these days. And it will mean that unfortunately then I won't be able to see anybody. So hopefully this will work.
Yeah, that's looking good.
And is it in presentation mode, Steve? Can you just reassure me?
Hang on, not yet.
Okay. Is that?
Yes, you're good to go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much. I was asked to come along and give a bit of a general update on our recent developments at Cycling UK, and particularly to just talk a bit about the Cycle Advocacy Network, our rebrand, and other events of this year. But I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. I'm sure we can have a really useful discussion. So please feel free to ask me about anything. I may not be able to answer it, but I'm prepared to do my best. So kicking off. I imagine that many of you know Cycling UK already, but I don't want to assume that you know too much. Don't want to be too arrogant. We were formerly the Cycle Touring Club CTC, and we are the nation's cycling charity across all 4 nations of the UK. And these are our 4 key strands of work. So we are still a membership organisation. We're a membership charity. We do lots of what we call behaviour change work. So it's based on a behavioural change model to get people back into cycling or to discover the joys of cycling for the first time. And we run that across England and Scotland. And then the area that I imagine most of you are most familiar with is our campaigning and policy work, which we do across, again, all 4 nations of the UK. So we have a campaigns team, we have our Cycle Advocacy Network who do our campaigns work. We campaign on a really wide range of issues, infrastructure funding, obviously road danger reduction. We do this through our policy team and also through the CAN network. We also have our legal defence fund known as CDF, where we raise money to be able to do local campaigns and fund legal action. And we work in alliance with other organisations, and primarily at the moment we work with the Walking and Cycling Alliance. So that's an alliance of all of the bigger cycling and walking charities in England. So that's a bit about us. I'm just going to go on to do a bit of a recap on probably the major things that have happened so far this year. And hopefully this one you will have noticed. We did a rebrand at Cycling UK, which was long overdue, happened in April this year after lots and lots of consultation, including with our members to make sure that they were supportive of it, and lots of our current and hopefully future audiences. So the reason that we did this was because when we did a lot of research with our audiences, people still thought of us as a membership club and CTC, which we are, but we're also so much more. Our brand was a little bit old-fashioned. I don't know if you remember, but we had a little "we are" at the top of all of our logos. So people used to contact us and say, "Dear, we are. Do you help me with?" So that really wasn't helping us. We wanted to reach into a much broader audience and a new audience of people beyond the cycling enthusiast audience, which had been our kind of historic reach. So we hope that this new brand represents us a lot better. Hopefully it makes us look a bit more modern, a bit younger, it's a little bit more eye-catching and more colourful. And the audiences that we're using represent the full breadth of the audiences that we actually reach through a lot of our work now. And hopefully it also looks a bit more professional. So this was a big piece of work for us, and hopefully it hasn't gone entirely unnoticed. So shortly after this was probably our kind of biggest week, in Bike Week, in fact, this year. We were able to celebrate 10 years of the Big Bike Revival. I don't know how many of you know the Big Bike Revival, but it has obviously been running in lots of different forms over the last 10 years. It's been gradually evolving. And so we celebrated that amazing 10-year anniversary in Parliament. It's actually reached now an incredible 628,000 people. So what's really exciting about this programme is that it works in focused in areas of multiple deprivation. It works across rural, urban and suburban areas of England. We have amazing data sets, including longitudinal studies on the impact for people in their lives of starting cycling again. We can see whether it takes. And we also have lots of evidence about the sorts of interventions and trials that really help people to start cycling. So it's been a brilliant impact for that 628,000 people, but it's also given us this amazing data, which nobody else has, which hopefully will help all of us have a much better impact on cycling in the years to come. So as part of this, we awarded what we called the Real Yellow Jersey to 10 people who've been involved in the Big Bike Revival. I had the pleasure of meeting them all in Parliament. We've done a lovely video. If you want to cheer yourself up, do have a look at the video that we've got on the link here, because I think we'll send the slides around afterwards. But these were a really inspiring group of 10 people from different programmes, different projects, who had transformed their lives through cycling. So I think for those of us that cycle every day, it's a kind of cool part of our lives. Maybe I feel like I sometimes just take cycling for granted. It's sometimes really refreshing to meet people who've just discovered it, and it's made a huge difference to their lives in really different kinds of ways. So I felt like that was a really exciting thing for us to be able to do. And we've got loads of great data about the impact of the Big Bike Revival. So if you would like to have a look at that on our website, we've got a great impact report, which is very short, very succinct and very moving. So that was a big part of our work earlier this year. And there's just a couple of other things that I would really like to mention. First of all, we've been doing a big programme, big project and campaign around women's safety. So it's called My Ride, Our Right, and it's really focused on how we can make cycling feel safer for women. Because we know that the biggest barrier for women in around cycling is their perception of safety on the roads. The campaign so far has had a really positive response. We know that lots of women tell us they would like to cycle more, but they have barriers, real and perceived, which perhaps some of us who are more used to cycling wouldn't necessarily be aware of. And we know actually cycling is a very safe way to travel, and is actually astonishingly not necessarily seen like that particularly by women. So women are much more likely to be put off by those concerns about sharing the road, particularly with larger vehicles. So what we're doing is we're making the case to politicians. We're trying to run this campaign and reach to different people in different audiences, and help them feel more confident about travelling. So we'll be talking about this in particular in the run up to the Scottish and Welsh elections next year. It's a great opportunity to be able to influence those politicians. We've obviously been writing to representatives in Parliament. We've got campaign action for people to do that if you'd like to take part. And then in October, we've got communities across the UK who are organising glow rides. So this is the first time we've tried to do these kind of mass participation glow rides. They're supposed to be both a celebration of cycling and drawing attention to women's safety in cycling, and particularly shining a light on routes that we all feel might need improving. So please have a look on our website and see if there's one near you that you'd like to take part in, or I think you can also sign up to run one yourselves. Sophie, who's on the call today, has to take all the credit for organising all of this. So thanks, Sophie. I think we've got 25 organised so far in lots of different towns and cities across the country. And so just finally moving on to the Cycle Advocacy Network, I imagine that this being the group it is, you're probably all really aware of the Cycle Advocacy Network already, but I'm actually really surprised often when I'm talking to campaigners around the country that they don't know about this. So I'm always really encouraging people to join up. And if you come across people who aren't, then please encourage them to be a part of it. It's not about Cycling UK, it's genuinely about supporting people across the country from whatever background to speak up for cycling and to share their experiences and knowledge with one another too, much like the Active Travel Cafe, I suppose. So whether that's people trying to find a way to reduce the speed limit or start a bike bus, campaign for infrastructure funding, find out how to influence their local authority or local politicians. There's always somebody in the network who's been there, done that, and has the scars and can give you some really practical advice. So we've also got lots of resources on there, lots of guides. One that's actually been really popular around bike buses is about how to organise insurance around rides and how to do risk assessments, those sorts of practical things. So we do lots of webinars, and as I'm sure you're aware, you can sign up as a local representative. So we've now got over 300 representatives, they're all really active and increasingly diverse, because obviously that was something that we thought was also quite important to reach a much broader audience of cycle campaigners across the country. We're always interested in growing new groups, and so if you want to set up a group near you, do talk to us. And we're particularly looking to nurture new campaign groups in Wales and in Northern Ireland. So if you have any contacts in Wales and Northern Ireland of the campaigning mindset, we're particularly keen to be able to nurture some groups there. So Steve, that's my kind of speed through update on what we've been doing at Cycling UK. I'm happy to take some questions or just have a bit of a broader discussion if that's helpful.
A big branded thank you at the end. Well, Sarah, as a brand person, I think your brand is a triumph. So love it to bits. And I'm just going to take advantage. We've got one question in the Q&A, but while I've got the floor, I've got a couple of questions for you as well, which is you've thought about it's sort of three-part question, if you like, just to make life complicated. But
I'll take notes.
In going through a rebrand, I'm sure you reflected at some point and got lots of comments on the wider sort of image and perception of cycling in the UK and where we are on a kind of journey towards the mainstream of cycling as a mode that everybody enjoys. And I'd be interested in your reflections on, you've been through this process, but what's the bigger image of cycling in the UK and what are your thoughts on it, and how does that cascade through to the work you're doing through things like the glow rides and trying to increase the accessibility of cycling, increase the diversity of people on bikes in the UK, and is image a big part of that challenge? So it's a bit of a big question, but I thought it'd be really interesting to get your thoughts on that particular part of the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it was a huge part of our work through the rebrand process is to try and understand what appealed to people about cycling and what kind of put them off. And I think that the perception's probably different in different parts of the country. So I suppose probably where I'm based in London, I'm sure people in Cambridge and other like very cycling cities probably have a different kind of perception. But I think the prevalent perception our brand agency told us was still of middle-aged men cycling on very expensive bikes, and probably not the kind of day-to-day cycling that we both do ourselves, but probably aspire to. And that a lot of people who cycle also don't see themselves as cyclists. And so sometimes the sort of not just the image that we use, but sometimes the language that we use is really important. So not trying to use the words that are kind of exclusive or really speak to people as cyclists, because a lot of those people, even if they do cycle fairly regularly, don't think of it as an identity in the way that perhaps some of us would, because it's such a huge part of our lives. One of the things that was really interesting that our agency did was they split out the different potential audiences around cycling for us. And so when we talked about our brand, we also talked about the kinds of audiences that we're currently reaching and the sorts of audiences that we could easily reach, and then the audiences that would be much further away from us. And that was actually really interesting. I mean, these things are always very kind of artificial barriers and curtains they put down between these categories of people, and I'm sure lots of people reach across them. But the sorts of people that certainly we at Cycling UK were reaching more easily were more of the kind of the recreation cycling audience and the slightly older cycling audience, where I suppose from our membership we have much more of a track record, and perhaps that's the image that we've also had historically. And the audiences that I think we are reaching through our programs, through our behaviour change programs, where the diversity is really, really significant. So more than 50% of participants on our behaviour change programme are women. The diversity of those programmes, both in terms of ethnicity, age, and social background, is much more diverse than our membership. Those aren't necessarily the sorts of people that see themselves as cyclists, and they don't fit into that kind of recreation audience. So I think the way that we thought about it at Cycling UK is we have an existing audience, which is really powerful. We have some amazing campaigners, really loyal members who are really great advocates and champions for our work. And we still haven't reached that audience. Is bigger than we actually reach. So there's still quite a lot of headroom to reach that audience and influence them and get them engaged in the work that we're doing. In addition, there's a kind of another audience that we haven't even, I guess we maybe reached through our behaviour change programs, that we haven't really engaged in campaigning, feeling like they're part of the cycling community, or that they want to take action on our part. And we feel like that's a really ripe audience for us. And because we're doing the behaviour change work, they don't feel like they're that far away from us. So we really wanted to be able to reach that audience. I think we feel that we need to increase the number of people cycling as part of that image change. And we also, in order to do that, need to reach a much more diverse audience, because we, just in terms of numbers, we need to be able to do that. And part of the way that we're doing that is by changing the imagery that we use. So we obviously still include a lot of the imagery that we used to use for our existing audiences, but we're trying in our films, in our pictures, and in the way that we talk about cycling, to be really mindful of highlighting those people that we wouldn't necessarily think of as cyclists, because that helps those people to think that cycling's for them. But I think it's probably something that's not going to change overnight.
And so just to follow up, I'm going to pick some questions that naturally come kind of cascade out of that, if you like, and then I'll bring some other questions in that we've got in the Q&A, and there's some in the chat as well. So I'm trying to fish bits out of different places. And Adrian, I saw your hand up as well. So if you want to post a question, please do. Mark Strong in Brighton has asked a specific question about how this pertains to local groups and modernising that old CTC image at a local level. So what kind of activities going on there?
So we have probably just under 100 member groups at the moment, but we have something like 800 to 900 affiliated groups. And I imagine, Mark, when you're talking about that, you're probably thinking about our member groups, because our member groups tend to skew older, more established, probably set up through the CTC network. They're constituted parts of the charity, so they're a little bit different from affiliated groups. But what we've been doing is we've been increasingly trying to bring those sets of groups together as an organisation. So one of the challenges that a lot of our member groups face is trying to get new members and trying to kind of reinvigorate their membership and get people out cycling with them. So we know that our affiliated groups are sometimes doing that in a different way. There tend to be the sort of a broader range of different kinds of cycling groups, so they can also help the member groups with some of those ideas around how to reinvigorate their membership. But our policy really at Cycling UK is not to really tell our groups what to do. So I think when people are cycling in groups, they're doing that for their own reasons. They're getting something out of it. As long as they're enjoying their cycling and they're having fun in their groups, then that's absolutely fine with us. We just want to support them to do that. I think sometimes those groups are worried about longevity, the number of people in the group, whether they've got enough people to run the group. So I probably spend a lot of time talking to groups about how they can expand their membership. And that's sometimes where contacts with other groups and that kind of experience can be really helpful. And we would encourage and help them to diversify their membership. But I think our member groups want to do that anyway, because they want to have the next generation of people coming in to take over, to be the volunteers and join them on the rides. So our policy is really to support the groups to do what they want to do, and to encourage them to do that, and also to encourage more groups to join as affiliates so that we can support them with their kind of insurance and rides. And they don't necessarily need to be full members and constituted groups of the charity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Howard. Perfect. So one question we've got, this will be a very quick one, I think, because I think in your presentation, somebody didn't quite get what Big Bike Revival actually is. So
Oh,
could you
yes.
do a very quick
Yeah.
explainer of what is this Big Bike Revival thing that's celebrated 10 years?
Okay, yeah. So it's a community-based cycling program. It works on a behavioral science model, but the basics are fix, learn, ride. So we fix people's old bikes. We teach them how to cycle, which sounds really odd for adults, but is actually really important. Even people that learned to cycle when they were kids, just to give them that confidence to get back on a busy road. We teach them how to do that and feel confident in their cycling skills. And then ride refers to setting them up in little social groups. So lots of people want to ride with other people, usually on off-road routes to start with. So we set them up in small community-based social cycling groups. So fix, learn, ride is the model, with lots of different variations on that theme. Sorry for not
Excellent.
explaining that to start with.
Excellent explainer. Thank you very much. And you got a big thumbs up from Talia there. The next question we've got in the Q&A is from Ruth, which is looking back to Laura Laker's book, Potholes, etc. And she'd asked there about CPOs for cycle lanes. And Ruth asks whether you're asking for this. And I guess maybe that leads us through to a question of what your current campaign asks. You know, what politically are you driving for?
I'm sorry, Ruth. I don't know what's the CPO. You have to explain it to me. I'm not the most technically adept person when it comes to cycle campaigning.
Can I jump in?
As Sophie is here, she has promised to step in and help me out if there's something I can't
I'll jump in.
Ruth's
Okay.
come off mute already, Sarah, ready to jump in. So Ruth, do you want to explain?
A CPO is a compulsory purchase order.
Oh, I see.
And
right.
Most of this group know I spend a lot of time cycling in Holland. There isn't a single dual carriageway, motorway, tunnel, bridge that does not have a parallel cycle route with it. And that is because if they take farmland, they take a bit of forestry, they take it for green transport. We don't have that here, and local authorities and old farmers can refuse to even give a little bit of land. So where they put a cycle lane in, it's often shared use on a pavement, which is neither use nor ornament, especially along a 50-mile-an-hour road. And Laura Laker spoke to Duncan, remind me, Duncan
Solomon?
That's one, about CPOs, and it's something I've raised frequently. We need that to happen, because without that, we're constantly having to do little tiddly bits of arguing with landowners. Yeah, so sorry, I can't tell you anything more exciting than Duncan will have told you before on CPOs, I'm afraid. We aren't doing any specific campaigning on that. We campaign obviously for infrastructure investment at a national level, but also then support our cycle advocacy network to do that at a local level. We're campaigning on quite a few different areas. So rather than me list them, probably the easiest thing is I could send you a list afterwards, or the link to our website where we've got all of those different areas that we're focusing on. And
what we're trying to do is, in addition to doing all of our policy specific areas of work where we kind of scale them up and scale them down, depending particularly on what the opportunities are, in terms of kind of legislative or political attention, our women's safety campaign is our major campaign for this year. So what we're trying to do is we're really trying to get all of our focus around one big campaign that the whole organisation can support, and then have our other campaigns kind of continuing in the background, but probably not getting the same kind of push that we would do for a big national campaign, unless something particular happens and there's great opportunity. So what we always try to do is make sure that we've got a bit in reserve in the tank, if you like, so that we can always manage to be able to do that reactive campaign when it becomes
Please let me come back
necessary.
on this very quickly. Sorry, Steve.
No, Ruth.
Women
Ruth,
won't cycle if they don't
Ruth.
have a safe space to cycle. So it works.
Yeah,
in
and Ruth, yeah, I completely agree. And that's why infrastructure investment is a really crucial part of the women's safety campaign. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at what we're saying on that kind of campaigning. We might not be talking specifically about CPOs, but we're definitely talking about segregated cycle routes and definitely talking about infrastructure. And we're using this campaign as an opportunity to really make that case around infrastructure investment. So you'll see that across all of our policy and all of our campaigns. We're completely committed to that and completely agree with you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Ruth. Excellent question. I'm being very democratic, Sarah. So we have upvoting on the question. So there's the question with the most
okay.
Adrian's at the moment, which is how much do you work with bikeability? His wife is a cycling instructor, including adult cycle training, and the typical profile of not yet a cyclist aligns with the people that you are trying to reach, female or from an ethnic minority. So tell us about bikeability and you.
Yeah, I mean, Bikeability are part of the Walking and Cycling Alliance. So we work with them through that alliance. We don't work with children. We haven't got any programs that are working with children, largely because lots of other people are working with children. So we don't try to duplicate what other organisations are doing. So we obviously work with Bikeability in terms of training offer to make sure that that's aligned. And Bikeability have also been really generous in terms of offering their contacts and promoting our work, but also Sostrans work and British Cycling's work on their website, and with all of their amazing reach across all of the schools they work in across the whole of England. So they have a fantastic reach, massively diverse group of audiences that they're working with that all of us would love to be able to work with. But we don't want to duplicate the work that we're doing. So they're a really collaborative group, really supportive of us. We often do sort of surrogate campaigning. So we do kind of probably at Cycling UK, probably slightly more likely to put our heads above the parapet on lots of different campaigning issues. Bikeability, because of their government funding, sometimes aren't able to do that, but they would obviously support campaigning where they can. And equally, we would definitely take account of issues that they're raising through the Walking and Cycling Alliance, and we campaign together as much as we possibly can.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. So next one up, Peter Corkill's asked, could you speak a bit more about the Cyclist Defence Fund? What cases, etc., does it support, and what do you see as its future role?
Yeah, so it's been around for quite a long time, actually, and it's a sort of designated separate fund in our reserve. So it's restricted funding. We can only use it for legal cases around cycling. So when we fundraise against it, all of the money that people give goes to our campaigning work. So the sorts of cases that it's supported since I've started, so in the last sort of 4 to 5 years, have been particularly supporting the continuation of segregated cycle lanes, where councils have taken those out. So having that kind of legal challenge opportunity. So it's usually, I guess, a local group would probably contact us. I mean, often our campaigns team pretty aware of the major campaigns that are going on, Sophie, I think. So you probably have kind of heard of things prior to that, but people would contact us and talk to us about whether it was something that was eligible for additional legal support. They tend to be legal challenges where we feel like they can set a really useful precedent more broadly. So even it will be a local campaign, but maybe by getting that particular legal judgment, we'd be able to share that more widely with campaign groups across the whole of the country, and other people could benefit from it. So we wouldn't be able to, the campaign fund hasn't got millions of pounds in it. It's not the sort of thing where we could fund a local campaign everywhere. So the ones that we choose would tend to be those ones that have that kind of broader impact.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm emotionally invested in the next question. So I'm definitely asking it because my commute in the morning, Sarah, is a showdown between Brompton and Tractor, which so far I survived. Once a herd of cows, actually, but herding cows on a Brompton is not easy. But Josh has asked an excellent question about active travel uptake often seems concentrated in major cities. And what is Cycling UK's strategy for promoting cycling and active travel in rural and suburban areas where infrastructure and uptake tend to lag behind?
Yeah, so I mean, Sophie may want to come in on this one as well, but I guess probably twofold from the work that I've been involved in. So obviously there's the behavioural change work that we do, which is more about encouraging people to cycle. And that definitely takes place in rural and suburban areas as well as urban areas, both in England and in Scotland. So we're doing some really interesting work around access and transport poverty in Scotland. So that's kind of on the kind of getting people to cycle point. The cycle infrastructure, I think, is much more challenging, obviously, in rural and suburban areas than it is in urban areas. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sophie, usually our policy around this is why it's so important for us to get really have a good road safety campaign and reduce the road accidents and danger that we have on rural networks. So a lot of the work that we did and the way that we talked about our changes to the highway code campaign was a lot around how we change the way that people drive on our roads and use our roads and make sure that we're looking after vulnerable road users first, and where we can't get that infrastructure in place, trying to make sure that the way that we use our roads is as safe as possible for the most vulnerable road users. So our campaigning tends to be twofold. It's obviously all around investment in infrastructure, but there will always be that focus within our campaigning on reducing the danger on our roads.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm wondering, because you've asked Sophie to come in and she's sort of not announced herself yet. Sophie, did you want to add anything?
Hello.
Come off, open your camera up, come off mute.
Well, that's because Sarah's done an admirable job so far, so I haven't needed to. But yeah, I was just going to add, we've also been talking quite a bit in England, at least to Active Travel England, because they've been having a think about design guidance that's more specific and appropriate for rural areas, because the kind of at the moment, they can feel quite urban focused and potentially very expensive if local authorities are trying to follow it to the letter, which then means if you're trying to do a 5-10 mile stretch of railway path, it's just not going to happen. So we've been kind of thinking about how can you be a bit more practical about what standards we're asking for and say, okay, does it necessarily need to be, entirely all hard surfaced and all of these things, or can we go for the best option that's feasible and will actually get this path to happen? So I can't remember what the timings are for when they're hoping to publish that, but that should hopefully be quite helpful for rural councils as well.
Thanks, Sophie. Brilliant stuff. Make me feel a bit safer in the morning as well. Okay, Sarah, I'm being super democratic with the question. So I'm not choosing these. That's what people have voted for. So here comes the biggie. What is Cycling's UK view on wearing cycle helmets? Many everyday cyclists don't. There you go. The question's out there.
I can't believe that we haven't been asked about that before at the Active Travel Cafe. Our policy is it's up to you. So everybody should make their own decision. And that's recognizing that lots of people feel really strongly on one side or the other of that argument. It's up to people to make their own decision. The most important thing is that people get cycling.
There's an absolute tsunami of hand claps.
I think you got a standing ovation.
There you go. I think that's the most animated I've ever seen this group, and it's an animated group, Sarah. So well done. Next question. We've got another sort of 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to go through these because this probably is, you speaking to this group is probably a fundamental moment in the history of humankind. The next question from Graham. is he loves the balance in membership, and Cycling Advocacy Network is a great aim. He's asked, essentially, Graham's asked around, he'd like to see you campaign more with highways managers, chief engineers and the like, and referred to his highway authority in the 1960s. So I guess, Graham, have I got that right? You're thinking about maybe that sort of more professional campaign. Did you want to come in? Because you come off mute. I feel you're about to speak.
Thanks. The problem that I have in my county, couldn't possibly name it, could I? I live in Oxford, is that in spite of the county having a very pro-cycling set of policies and leaders, the highway engineers in carrying out projects ignore it. They ignore it. They use, Sarah might not know this, but they use DMRB, the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, which is applicable for motorways and trunk roads. They use it probably down to the smallest cul-de-sac in the county. It's a massive, massive problem. The stubborn reluctance to even adduce. I mean, they'll happily build an expensive segregated cycle lane. They might not sort out the roundabouts very well, but they just refuse to include cycling as a natural part of the mix. And I think that's where our big problem lies. I've only been campaigning for 20 or 30 years.
Thanks, Graham. Sarah?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think it kind of speaks to a kind of prevalent culture more than anything else, doesn't it? And we all know that's a really difficult thing to be able to change. And I suppose our campaigning and our policy influencing tends to focus on the politicians, really. And even that's really hard. You know, we're a tiny team. We're actually, we might be quite loud, but, you know, our policy and campaigns team is what, 8 people? I mean, it's really small. We're operating across all 4 nations of the UK. That's a huge amount of influencing we already have to do. And then we've got Devolution to take on board. This is where the power of the Cycle Advocacy Network really comes in, because it allows us to be able to support a broader group of volunteer campaigners to be able to be effective at a local level where, you know, we're never going to have the resource to be able to do that ourselves as a charity. And so I think I completely appreciate the challenge. And I guess what the solution is to that is it's the kind of the cultural change probably has to come from more locally than we would be able to do. I guess the sort of thing that we might be able to do through the Cycle Advocacy Network, through our model, for example, is to share experiences of cycle campaigners where they've been able to change that culture. You know, what's worked, how have they been able to shift the mindset of some of those workers? Are there levers that they can pull around training or experience to be able to do that? Are there things that have worked in terms of that kind of influence? But I don't pretend that that's an easy thing to be able to do. And I think it's probably a challenge that not only you, Graham, but other people are facing in councils and local authorities up and down the country, really.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to, because we brought Graham in, I feel it's democratic also to bring some other voices in. And Beth, I love your question so much. I think you should actually read it rather than me read it out for you, because I think it's a really interesting question. So did you want to actually jump in and ask your question?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I want to say thanks. We've done some work for the Big Bike Revival, so thank you very much for our funding. It's been great so far, last session tomorrow. But yeah, basically our issue is that, I mean, I've been there before. I've been a very confident time trialist, absolutely not bothered crazily cycling down dual carriageways. And now I feel very differently. But it's trying to capture those people who are unborn cyclists who could not imagine getting on a bike. It's how we kind of convert people into campaigners. Maybe you've said a bit already about the, you know, in terms of the behavioural change and stuff. But yeah, I guess I was interested because, I mean, I'm covering a very large area. There's a 500 plus membership cycling club, but you know, I'm really struggling. We've got about 10 people so far. So it's just very hard to find people. And I just wondered if you had any advice.
And is that, Beth, finding people within your cycling group to do the campaigning?
Oh no, sorry. I mean, I'm not running a cycling club. I'm trying
Yeah.
to run an advocacy group for transport. So a safe, sustainable travel Torbay, trying to promote transport options. But it's all these people who we refer to now as unborn cyclists because, they're walking amongst us. They say, oh, well, no, I couldn't get on a bike. No, it's far too dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is exactly the sort of modelling that Big Bite Revival and the behaviour change work has been doing. So I'd really urge you to have a look at our impact report because it sets out what the kind of behavioural science model is behind it. And it's really interesting because it looks at people's propensity to cycle and their motivation, and that kind of has to be there first. It might take a bit of digging to unearth, but you usually have something to work with. But I think some of that research into what is that propensity to cycle, what are the potential motivations you could be working with, is where we go when we're thinking about who are the community partners that we might want to work with, who are the bits of the population that we might want to really target to be able to do that. So thinking about what's their opportunity to cycle, what's their motivation to cycle is kind of the key thing. Because I totally agree with you. I think there are lots of people out there who, given the opportunity and let's face it, quieter roads, would be really keen to do that. And it's been really interesting seeing the transformation in London, actually, just thinking about those unborn cyclists amongst my friends who for years thought I was mad cycling through central London. A couple of them, women my age, have suddenly in the last 18 months started cycling because they have access to rentable Lime bikes. So for all of the complaints people make about these e-bikes, women who never felt safe to cycle before, didn't find it convenient, can pick up and drop off bikes as they want to and feel suddenly confident about cycling in central London. For me, that feels like quite transformational. I don't know quite what's going on there, but I think it's really interesting.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Adam, you've got your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Yes, as a co-host, I can't actually ask any questions, so this is the only way I can ask them. What I wanted to go back to was, is there Chris Boardman, when he was on previously, talked about well tag and web tag and the differences that's made in sort of transport policy. Have you seen differences in, say, the Welsh approach or the Scottish approach are taking, which has made a much bigger difference in terms of the kind of the cycle, putting in cycling infrastructure versus, say, the English very quite a almost combative approach that no, it's not web tag, it's whereas well tag is very much about putting sustainable transport at the heart of what you're going forward. And I was wondering if the campaigning side had seen any of this stuff.
Well tag and web tag, I'm sorry, I'm not really I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
sure.
I can't remember exactly what they stand for.
We're scratching the surface of technical detail here, Sarah. We've had sessions on tactile paving, curb heights. We can go as
Oh,
deep on
right,
stuff.
okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Adam, did you want to do a quick explainer on
Okay.
tags
Web
are?
tag and well tag are basically different ways of value as a cost modeling for building road systems and infrastructure.
Mm.
And for example, web tag puts a price for driving, the cost of driving much higher. So if you're in a bus, I think you're only about 10p an hour in value versus a driver, which is worth about 300 million pounds an hour. So when you start looking at building justifications for road building, you then look at the costs in terms of how many hours of driving time will be saved. Therefore, there's a cost. So the economic model around where you see, I know this is deep diving a little bit, but if, for example, the 20 mile per hour default 20 mile per hour is attributed to costing billions in economic costs, but not under the the Welsh evaluation, but under the English evaluation of roads, because it's costing an extra minute to drive. So I don't know if that's made a difference in terms of perception in Wales and your advocacy and what you're seeing happen there versus, but clearly that's not a question by the sounds of it you can answer here.
No, and I think it's a really interesting question. It's not something that I've been aware of. I don't think that our teams have really particularly looked at that, but I think it's a really interesting question because, of course, the ways in which we measure the impact of things influences massively how we start to design things. So I think it's a really interesting question. If you don't mind, I can't answer it, but I would like to take it away and share it with the team and see what they think. Certainly in terms of the impact that our programs have, the way that that's valued and financially assessed in the Treasury has made a huge difference to us. And it's also slightly shaped how we present our programs and what we focus on. So I'm sure that's the case with infrastructure funding in different countries too. So thank you for raising it, Adam, and I'll take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. And just for some bedtime reading, Adam's posted in the chat some more info, so you can load that onto your iPad before you fall asleep and have a little read. We've got two questions, Sarah. We've got another 5 minutes, then I'll wrap us up. We've got two questions, one from Jill in Manchester and one from Sarah Galligan, which are quite similar to each other. So I'll ask them both together. Jill's asked, have you got data on the impact of your rebrand in terms of recognition of Cycling UK? And what do you do and what you do? And have you increased the membership as a result, attracted wider diversity? Brackets, I think you've done a fantastic job, especially on the campaigning front. Keep going. So that's a big thumbs up from Jill there. And then Sarah has asked, if you could talk about the demographics of your membership profile and what are the trends that you're seeing in terms of membership growth?
Yep, sure. On the rebrand impact, it's a little bit too early to say because we only launched it in April. So the figures that we've got so far that we look at show an increase in unprompted awareness from something around 34% to, I think it's about 42%. So there has been an increase, but I think we're not getting too excited about it because we know these things are also quite seasonal. So it might just also be that it's summer. So I think what we probably want to wait for is at least a year's worth of figures before we can derive any particular conclusions from it. So I think I would say in response to that, early indications look positive, but we can't be certain yet. I think really this is a long-term thing for us. So we're looking for a change by the end of our strategy period, which is a 5-year period. So it'd be really 3.5 years from now. Has it increased our diversity and membership? Our membership has slightly increased, but of course it's really difficult to know why. I think one of the things about the whole sort of rebrand is we're not only looking at increasing our membership, because I think membership is it's not the only offer that we can make to people. So it's also just engagement in our campaigning work. It's making donations to Cycling UK. It's engaging with us in some other ways, also quite meaningful for us. And we know that some of these audiences might have less of a propensity to become a member of something. So all of the membership research tends to indicate that members tend to be older. People under the age of 40 don't tend to join things in the same way. And so what we don't want to do is try and force a group of people into one product if it's not what they're interested in. So we're trying to offer different ways to engage with the charity. So I wouldn't say that an increase in membership is our number one indicator around brand awareness and recognition. And diversity in membership it's a challenge, for exactly that reason. And it's not a challenge for us alone. It's a challenge for every heritage membership organisation. In fact, probably almost every membership organisation. So I have done some work with a group of membership charities, done some research and then kind of convened this group because I'm really interested in what works for membership, and everybody's struggling with the same thing. So our membership tends to be older. The age has come down slightly, but the average is still, I think, 59, or maybe 62. The proportion of women in our membership has increased. So that's, I guess, some indication of diversity, but tends to be older, tends to be more towards the southeast of England, and tends to be wealthier. But that's the same for almost every membership organisation. So we're not alone in that. I think it's probably just a kind of standard. But obviously it does make an impact on us because we're a membership charity. So our members run the organisation. They are our trustees. They vote on our trustees. They elect our trustees. And basically kind of have quite a lot of control over the organisation. So we do really want to diversify and broaden and extend our membership. So it will continue to be a priority for us. But I don't think we can necessarily only judge the success of our brand on whether we've got an increase in membership or not.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to ask you the last question. And Sophie, I've made you co-host. You could go into, if there's anything you'd like to answer in the Q&A box itself, you can actually go in and type while Sarah's, I'm going to get you to do double act. You can go into the Q&A.
Poor
Anything
Sophie,
urgent.
thanks, Sophie.
Anything urgent, I'm parachuting you in to the Q&A box to answer anything urgent. And then Sarah, while Sophie's having a look at those, and if there's anything super important there that we're not going to get to, because we've still got quite a lot of questions in there. The most popular question, which I think can be our final one, and then we can wrap up, is whether the glow rides are meant to be a kind of take back the night for cycling. And is Cycling UK planning more action to address the misogyny and high rates of aggressive, threatening use of automobiles experienced by women while cycling? So what's the agenda there? And are you planning to do more in that space?
Yeah, this is definitely one where I'm going to ask Sophie to come in, because it seems rude for me to speak on this subject, seeing as Sophie's been the primary actor in it. And I certainly know that in terms of kind of aggressive drivers, that has been a big part of the kind of research finding for the start of this campaign. But Sophie, do you want to say a bit more about the glow rides, as they're your baby?
Yeah, sure. I think the kind of take back the night, reclaim the night march style thing is quite a similar idea. This one that, you know, we want to be able to move around where we live in the dark with confidence. In terms of what we're asking for, we're mainly focusing at the road safety and aggressive driving aspect on, we need more publicity around the highway code changes and this kind of hierarchy of responsibility idea that if you're driving a big heavy vehicle, you need to watch out for other people who are not in big heavy vehicles. Because that's kind of the bit that we can most directly influence, I guess. There's this whole wider problem about general aggressive behaviour towards women who are walking or cycling on their own, which is kind of a much bigger societal problem that we as a cycling charity can only have a very limited influence on. So we recognise that's a huge part of it, and we want to try and influence that. But the main kind of things that we're focusing on are sort of that safer driving through the highway code, and also having those safe separate spaces that aren't dark, scary underpasses and that aren't busy roads that actually feel nice to cycle on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. Well, I don't know what you think, Sarah, that's probably a perfect note to end on, and the really vital work you're doing. We started rebranding, we ended with actually changing the quality of life for half the population. So it's pretty important, that stuff, isn't it? Thank you so much. We have got loads more questions, but we've run out of time, and it's been a really great session. I know your colleagues wished you luck. How do you feel at the end of a Active Travel Cafe session? You feeling okay?
Well, it's been great to meet you all virtually, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest. I really appreciate it, and it's really nice to know that there's such a level of interest in the work that we're doing. And maybe you'll invite me to just come along as a member of the audience sometime. That would be great.
Exactly.
And
Well,
thanks, Sophie, for stepping in. I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you, Sophie. Well, listen, that's brilliant. You're getting lots of round of applause. Sarah, you are welcome here whenever you would like. Just log in to activetravelcafe.org.uk, find the link, join us, and we'd love to see you. A quick thank you to everybody who's asked questions. Apologies that we didn't get to all of them. There's quite a few left in the Q&A box. But a wonderful session. Thank you again, Sarah and Sophie. Next week, we are alighting in the West Midlands with the West Midlands Combined Authority Active Travel and Road Safety Commissioners. So please do join us next week, where we'll be looking at what Becky and Matthew from the Combined Authority are doing in the West Midlands. Other than that, thank you for joining us. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.